Hi everyone, welcome to Recitation 1 out of 5. In this series of videos, we're going to just walk through how to get started with N8N, some of the functionalities, how to use it, and really build up to being able to use this as a very useful tool in AI and just hopefully in your everyday life. So let's get started. So just to give you a quick intro about who I am, I'm a third-year PhD candidate in operations. I'm very interested in how education and technology interact, and so, of course, the big thing right now is AI, and so that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. Previously, I taught, and so I'm very excited to be able to teach and help you learn about everything in this course. So just to quickly give you an idea on how we're going to go about this, you might be wondering why I've got some photos of pies. These were pies that my mom actually baked. But really, I want to give you the tools necessary to be able to explore more on your own. So in this analogy, you've probably eaten a pie, but you might not have made one on your own. And so I want to first teach you the ingredients. Then we can start to bake some pies together, and then you can start to come up with your own recipes and really start to see how things interact. Maybe I'm taking this analogy a little too far, but I want you to be comfortable exploring on your own, and so we might not cover everything that's possible in N8N, but we'll give you the foundation so that you can do so on your own and feel confident in that exploration. So to give you a quick idea on how these recitations are going to work, of course there's the in-person version, but there's also these videos. I'll provide a document on Canvas and on Slack that has instructions walking through everything that we're going to do in the recitation, but might not exactly tell you why we're doing it. I'll try and also include that, but that's partially also why I'm here, to kind of explain and make sure it's very clear why we are doing what we are doing. And each recitation is roughly going to be divided into two parts, which are core content, which will be the majority of the recitation, which is what is needed for the homework, what we want you to be able to do independently. And I'll kind of split it into periods where I demonstrate something or build something for 5 to 10 minutes. If you want to, you can follow along, but I also understand that it can be hard to do so at the same time. You're also welcome to pause the video at any point, which will be helpful. But then I'll also give you some set time where I'll put a series of questions on screen. I'll pause, or tell you to pause, I guess, and you can try those out on your own before continuing with the video. And then I'll have some exploratory content at the end, which is kind of things that you can expand upon on your own. I'll introduce some topics, which just showcase how wide of a variety of things are possible with N8N. And so if you want to do this on your own, you're able to. This last point is maybe a little less relevant if you're watching the video, but you can always send me questions. And I really do want to emphasize that no prior skills are needed. We're going to build from the ground up and meet you where you are to make sure that you feel very comfortable with this. It can be tricky. Just as a reminder for the class, there's a class project which involves building something in N8N and showcasing value. And these projects don't need to be complicated. If you want to, you can go nuts in N8N, and that's totally okay. But you're also able to, even with just the content from today, build something really special, and that can be very helpful for people. And so I don't want you to forget that. That is the core part of the project. And there will be 5 homeworks, one for each recitation. The homework will be released on Tuesday night before the recitation, and will be due Tuesday evening at like 11:59 p.m. before the next recitation. And it's going to be 3 questions. I'll show you what this looks like a little later on, but it'll be entirely screenshot based, where you're just like taking a picture of the thing that we built and showing that it worked in some way. And just as a quick note before we dive into building things, just remember that this is a new technology. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes you run into an error, and that can be very, very frustrating. But at the same time, that's how you're going to learn. You're going to run into something. You're going to figure out what exactly went wrong, and then you're not going to make that mistake again. And you have a lot of resources available to make sure that you can get through these errors, such as Professor Martin, me, a lot of LLMs such as ChatGPT are pretty good at problem solving with this. There are a lot of templates of things that other people have built in N8N. There's community forums. There's a lot of YouTube tutorials building different N8N workflows. And so those are a great place to start. That's how I started to learn N8N on my own as well. So with that in mind, let's get into the core content and let's get building. Let's get started with N8N. And I just kind of want to introduce what N8N is and some basic terminology before we get started. So I'll put that on screen right now. So N8N is what's called a workflow automation platform. Originally, it didn't have any AI, and it was really designed for repetitive tasks like filtering your emails, auto-responding to emails, logging things in a Google Sheet, stuff like that. However, when AI started to blow up, it also they started to build in some of these nodes, and that's really how we're going to be using it. It makes it a lot more autonomous and able to do other things that weren't necessarily possible before. So here's kind of like the main components that we have. I'm going to go a little out of order, but first of all, we've got like these things called workflows. So that's kind of like the big thing we are going to build, and that will perform some process. And those workflows are made up of several different parts. First of all, we've got this idea of a node. And like we saw in lecture 1, a node is just one of these little squares that performs a specific task. So that could be writing an email, reading an email, putting something in a Google Sheet. It could be calling some LLM. There's a lot of different things that these nodes can do. Then we've got this idea of triggers. So our workflow needs to start somehow. And a trigger is just a specific type of node that says, hey, when this certain action happens, this is when our workflow should start. And these nodes and triggers, which are a type of node, are connected using these things called connections, which just tell us which order the actions should be performed in. So maybe when we receive an email, we need to draft a response, and then we need to send it off. So we need to know the order in which things happen. And finally, we've got credentials. What makes N8N really powerful is it's got the ability to connect to a lot of different other services. So the primary ones we're going to use today are both Google, and specifically Google Calendar, and OpenAI. But there are a lot of different things that we could do. And to connect to these things called APIs, we need to have some sort of password. And this tells us which account we're connecting to, making sure it's a secure connection. But we also want to make sure that we keep these private so no one else can access our API. So with that in mind, let's head over to N8N and get started. Okay, so here I am over in N8N, and you'll see something like this when you log in. Perhaps there are slightly fewer workflows than I have, but this is where we'll get started. But just as a quick side note, on Canvas, there's a link to this Recitation 1 document, which walks you through all of the steps we're doing. So in fact, what I was just talking about with N8N terminology, I made a previous video on it. But then it'll kind of tell us exactly the steps that we are going to go through today. So if you need to pause and reference that, you can always go back in the video, of course, but that also provides the instructions written out explicitly for you. Okay, so in N8N, what we are going to do is we're going to start by creating a workflow. So in the top right, I'm going to click this orangish button, and you'll get something that looks like this. So this is our canvas where we are going to start to build. And when it says add first step, so there's several ways we can start to add nodes. First, we could do like this add first step. We could build with AI, which we'll probably discuss later on. And then we've got this plus, which shows us all of the nodes. But we're just going to click here for now. And it's going to ask us what triggers this workflow. So as we just mentioned, triggers are how we're going to start. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. So we could just trigger manually by clicking a button. On app event is something like receiving an email, but there's a lot of different things we could do there. We could schedule it to be a certain time of day. When we have a form, so something like a Google form, when another workflow executes it, that's something we'll talk about in Recitation 3. But we're going to start with on chat message. So when I click it, we get this pop-up. So we're kind of like in the node right now. And so I can either press like out here, or I can press this X to close it, and we can see that we have a node now available to us. So it's important to note that when you have one of these nodes, we can like set it up to have some sort of like chat outside, like a Telegram or Slack or WhatsApp. But we're going to use something that's like native to N8N, just because it's easier for testing, easier to explain for now, and then we can kind of expand upon this later on. So another important note is that N8N does not autosave. So we've got this save button, so it's very important to click it. Sometimes it gets like stuck looping and doing things, so we'll want to save and then refresh. It's very important to save, otherwise you're going to lose your work. It can also rename my workflow, so I'm just going to call it Recitation 1 workflow, just so I know what it is and I don't have something that's like workflow 249 or something. Okay. So now this says when chat message is received, our workflow will trigger. Right now it's not going to do that much, but if I just type hello and then I send it in this chat box here, we'll see we get a green check mark and we see workflow executed successfully. So when we send a message here, so we get this thing, we'll talk about like what exactly is happening there in Recitation 2, but it started our workflow. And right now this is not a super useful workflow, but we're going to now build on it. And what we're going to do first is we're first just going to build essentially ChatGPT, and then we'll start to customize it, and then we'll get into making it a little bit more useful by making it into a Google Calendar agent, something that can control our calendar. Okay, so now we've got trigger. We want to add some more nodes. So I can press this plus here, or if I press this plus here, it automatically connects it up. I'm going to start here just to show you, just for the sake of a demonstration. But when we do it, there's a lot of different types of nodes. So there's AI nodes, there's something like actions in different apps. We can transform data, we can change like how things flow. There's a lot of things here that we will discuss, and I encourage you to explore on your own as well. We'll start with AI. You can always just search, but I'm going to choose the AI agent. When I click it, we're once again in the node, but so let's just exit out of it just to see what we have. Okay. So we've got this AI agent, and it's worth noting right now that we can see pretty clearly that they are not connected up. If I were to press the plus, they would be automatically connected, but when you have things that aren't connected, you can just pull from here, and I just pull it to the left side of the AI agent, and now they're connected. So when this activates, this node will activate, and then this one will. And okay, so let's see what happens now. This is not going to work, but just to show you for the sake of demonstration what's going to happen, let's try this again. Hello there. So when I do it, okay, we get this red X. And I just want to show you that because that means that there's an error. And that's going to happen to you at some point. And it's important to know what's happening and start to troubleshoot it. It says problem in node AI agent, a chat model subnode must be connected and enabled. Okay, that might seem a little confusing right now, but what we can see is actually that we've got this thing called chat model right here, and there's a star indicating it's required. So right now, this is just a node that says, that serves as like a wrapper around our LLM, but we haven't specified what LLM we want to use as our brain, and we need to call it somehow. So we're going to get that set up now. So, and then we'll go in and talk about like the settings in this AI agent node. So we'll get there in just a second. But first of all, when I click this plus, we can choose from a bunch of different models. So we could choose Anthropic, we could choose Gemini, DeepSeek. We're going to go with OpenAI for now. So I'm going to click on it. And we'll see something here, and you probably don't have a credential set up yet. That's totally fine. So we're going to talk about how to do that. So to do it, I'm going to click this drop down. It might just say plus create new credential. So that's what we're going to click. And when we do so, I'll just say like, I'll just change the name so I know what it is. OpenAI credential. And what we need to do now is get our API key. And you can think of an API key as a password that tells it who to bill when you use OpenAI. So you probably have an API key already set up. If you don't, let me quickly walk you through the steps. You would go to this website, platform.openai.com. So a little different than ChatGPT, and you'll see something like this. And you might have a settings in the top right. It might say something like get started. If it says get started, you're just going to like click through those menus to get it set up. And then when you click settings and API keys, I've got some already, but what you'll do is you'll hit create new secret key. And then you just have to name it. I'm just going to call it my test key for now. But you can name it something so it's a little bit more specific. And I'll hit create new secret key. It's going to take a second, and then it's going to give me my API key. If I hit done, I'm not going to be able to see it again. So that's important. Also, it's very important to note that this needs to stay super secret. You don't want to post this anywhere. So after this video, I'm actually going to delete this because I'm going to be posting it online. Because if anyone else has your API key, they can use it and it will bill you. So it's very important that you keep this secret. But I'll just copy it for now. I'll go back to NAN, and then I'll put in my API key right here. And then I can just hit save. You don't even need an organization ID right now. And it says testing, and then it says connection tested successfully. Okay, great. So now that I've got that set up, this is saying, okay, you're going to use your OpenAI account to as what you're going to call when you use this model. Now, I can actually just choose which model. So ChatGPT, by default right now, is using GPT 5.2. So we're going to choose that, but you can see if you click here, you actually have access to a lot of different models and older ones as well. So they have different costs. It turns out they're not that expensive, but that's something that you can do if you would like. Also, there's a verification process in order to use the latest models. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can always use some of the older models as well. And then we've got some options here. I'll discuss them a bit later because they'll be covered a little bit more in the lectures. So I want to hold off on that. But for now, we're just saying, okay, when you make this call, you're going to use model GPT 5.2 from the API, and you're going to use this credential. So that's who you're going to bill when you use this. So note, it's like technically using ChatGPT, but it's like a little bit different. It's not like the conversations you're used to online. Okay, and so now let's see what happens. I'm going to save out of habit. And now let's see what happens. Oh, sorry, before we do that, let me click into the AI agent just to show you a couple of the settings. So when you're talking with ChatGPT, you're sending it messages, and that's really what is called the user message. So you're sending it messages, it's thinking some, and then it's responding to you. And in this case, we have like this source for prompt, and what that means is we need to specify what we are going to send it. And in this case, it's got like a default thing. Since we have like a chat trigger, it just automatically is able to use that message for the AI, which is great, makes our lives super easy. And we can actually see this prompt, which is what is actually being sent. It's kind of grayed out, but we can see that's previewed here. It's actually the message that I just sent. But if we want, we can also hit define below, and then we could specify something and say like, hello there. But for now, let's just use the chat trigger so that like we can just type something in the chat and it'll send it directly. There's some more settings. We will discuss that in just a second, but let's see now what happens if we say hello. So when I send it, it starts to think. It actually, you can see that this node activated, and then we actually get a message back. Hello, how can I help you today? And if you converse with this some, you'll see it is literally just like ChatGPT. It's the exact same model with a couple small differences, which we will discuss in just a second. So let's just take a quick second and figure out how this is different than us just conversing with ChatGPT normally. So first of all, it's important to note that there are some little tricks that OpenAI does to make it seem like ChatGPT is up to date. However, really, we'll discuss this in lecture 2, it's trained up to a certain point, and it's got kind of like a knowledge cutoff there, and then it can like search the internet to like make it seem like it's up to date. But for example, I say, what's the weather today? While regular ChatGPT is able to search the internet to do that, when we just call the OpenAI model, it's just the model itself, and it doesn't know. So in this case, it says, I can't see your location or live weather by default. If we really share this, it's going to just start to hallucinate. It's probably going to make a pretty accurate guess about like what Chicago weather is like at this time of year. But it doesn't actually know. The other thing it doesn't have is what's called memory. So for example, if I say, my name is Alex, it's going to think for a second. And this is, how can I help you today? But I'm going to then say, what's my name? So with regular ChatGPT, when you have a conversation, it's kind of got this idea of what you've previously said. In this case, now it says, I don't know your name from this chat. Each message is an individual call to the model. And what we have to do is we have to manually add something called memory in order for it to have a sense of what our previous conversation has been. And luckily for us, we actually have this nice little thing where it says memory. And so we're actually going to press this plus to add like this memory subnode. So when I click it, we have a bunch of different ways for us to store the conversation that we've been having. And I'm going to choose simple memory. And so it's stored in N8N memory. And luckily for us, it's got like a really nice integration with this chat node that we had before. But we could also choose define below and then choose something called a key. And the key is what tells N8N and then OpenAI which which messages go together. So for example, if I'm having a conversation with the OpenAI API, and then someone else also is, if we have different keys, it's not going to mix up our messages. But if we have the same key, all of those messages go together. So it's important for them to be different. We can see that for this session, it's got this long string of numbers and letters that's hopefully unique to me. Then we've got this thing called the context window length, which is just how many messages in the conversation do we want to send to OpenAI. So kind of what's hidden behind this is we are sending all of these messages at once, including our newest message, to the model. And then it is deciding, based on that conversation, what comes next. And so that's how it's getting the context of our conversation. I generally say something like 20 messages. If you have sent back and forth 20 messages, it should have a pretty good sense of what the conversation is. However, don't quote me on that. That is not super scientific. I just find it to be a pretty good rule of thumb. However, that is a little bit more expensive, so you could also choose something like 5 if you want it to be a little bit more local. Really depends on what you are going for. Now that it has this memory, if I were to say, my name is Alex, and then I later say, what's my name? Okay, now it knows my name. And so I'm going to save quickly. And so now it has a sense of like what, it can remember things in a sense, because it is just giving those messages back to the model every single time. Okay, so this is a great start. What we want to do next is we want to customize it. If you've built a custom GPT in ChatGPT before, this will look kind of familiar in that sense. But the idea behind this is that we can customize the tone and the language and like how our AI agent is going to interact in a way that ChatGPT doesn't normally. So to do that, we are going to go into the AI agent itself, and we're going to add an option. So under options, you'll click add option, system message. And so it kind of defaults to just saying you are a helpful assistant. But it's very important to note that there's like there's a hierarchy of instructions that our model is going to follow. So most importantly are the instructions that OpenAI kind of like hides and gives to the model every single time that tells it how to behave. We'll discuss this a little bit more, but it really needs to follow those to a T. They're very important that it follows. Next up, we've got the system message. It's perhaps a little bit less important, but it still really wants to follow these because it really determines its tone, its language, things like that. Then we can also provide instructions just using our messages, like the user message. But as you may have noticed, if you're just having a conversation with ChatGPT and then you ask it to behave in a certain way, it might start to forget that after a little bit. And the system message is a way to kind of get around that and make sure that it's more consistent. And the big thing with LLMs is that it's an information game. And if you have conflicting information, like at a specific level, so if you have like in your user message, you say like, act like a pirate and then don't act like a pirate, it's going to not be sure exactly what to do. But if we have them at like a different hierarchy level, so like for example, if we've got something in the system message that says like act like a pirate, and then we say in the user message don't act like a pirate, it kind of knows what to prioritize. That being said, conflicting information is still an issue, but we want to keep that in mind that the system message is perhaps a little stronger than the user message. So let's try this out. So actually in the Recitation 1 website document, if you scroll down, I provide you with an example of a system prompt. And in this one, it's just kind of a silly one where we make it be a cowboy philosopher teaching using the Socratic method. So it's going to try and give me questions to kind of lead me in the right direction. So you can actually hit this copy code button, and that'll copy this whole block. If I go back to NAN, I can just paste it into the system message. And then now, if we send a message, for example, saying, what's the difference between correlation and causation? And we send it, we'll see that it's going to not look like ChatGPT, like the base version anymore. So it's going to think for a bit. It's got a little bit more to do. Oops, I accidentally hid my chat. Here, I'll just click open chat. And we can see that this looks a little different. So it says, well now, partner, if two tumbleweeds roll through town at the same time, does that prove one pushed the other? Or could they just be answering to the same gust of wind? So this is not how ChatGPT normally would respond. And so we can see that we're changing the tone. So what I want you to do now is take a second. Feel free to pause the video, and here are some questions. I want you to start to look at the system prompt, change it, see if you can get it to act in slightly different ways. What are the challenges in this? Are you able to get it to work? For something like limiting the answer to 3 words, does it try and like come up with weird workarounds? So pause now, and then we'll be back to it in just a second. All right, hopefully you've taken a little bit of time to try out some of these problems. I think it's very interesting to see how the tone and the language changes as we start to manipulate the system message. Specifically, the second question is kind of funny. When I've tried this before, I've seen it try and like compress 2 words into one so that it can actually fit it into 3 words. But when I called it out on it, it still kept trying to do that. So it's a little bit of an art to figure out how to prompt our AI so that it does exactly what we want. And this is going to be kind of a recurring theme throughout the quarter, is figuring out how to build good prompts. This is kind of the core skill that you need. And it's just becoming more and more important. How can you build a prompt so that your AI is going to perform exactly how you want it to and not have like these weird edge cases? So with that in mind, we are going to jump over to building our Google Calendar agent. Just to let you know exactly how this is going to work, we are going to send a message in NAN using our chat, saying something like, add an event called Pottery to my calendar tonight from 7:15 to 9:15 p.m. It's going to be received by our AI agent, which will give the ability to control our calendar. It'll add it to our calendar and then send us a nice little message back saying something like, it has been added to your calendar. So let's go over to NAN and see exactly how this is going to work. So over in NAN, now we're going to use these things called tools. Right now our AI agent is just able to respond to messages, but we haven't given it access to anything at all. And when we have tools, this lets our AI agent decide exactly what it wants to do, in what order. It gives it some degree of autonomy. And we're going to use what's called our Google Calendar tool. So when I click on this plus, it comes up with a lot of different things. There's a lot of different tools in NAN. Let's start with Google Calendar. And probably the first thing that we want to do is have something that can create an event. First, we need to do create a credential so that it knows what calendar to connect to. This is actually very easy with Google Calendar. You'll just hit create new credential, and then you'll just sign in with Google. And so I recommend if you've to create a Google account just for this class. You can also use your personal Google account, but just in case it starts to add a lot of events to your calendar, I think it's a good way to start testing. Make sure you're confident about it before moving over to your personal account. So once you've created your credential, I need to hit close. You can see that there's a lot of different things here. We'll go through each parameter individually. So the tool description is just saying exactly what we want the tool to do, and so that our AI agent has a better sense of what each tool is used for. In this case, it says set automatically. If we say set manually, we can choose what it says. Currently it says create an event in Google Calendar. That seems pretty good for now, but at the same time, this is something that we'll probably want to be a little bit more specific on. We can also add it to the system message, and that's another way to do this. But for now, I'm just going to leave it on set automatically. For the resource, we can have tools that manipulate entire calendars, but we're going to just focus on the event level. We just want to create an event. For operation, we could create events, delete them, get events, update them. Once again, stick with create for now. For calendar, I'm just going to use my base calendar, not the holidays one. And now we've got a couple interesting settings. We've got the start and the end. So those are the two main things you need to create an event in your calendar. You don't even need a title because you could just like put a block, but you need to have a start time and an end time. And by default, it's showing now, and it's showing now plus 1 hour. And so by default, it's saying, okay, whenever you create an event, it's going to start at this point in time and end an hour from now. But that's not what we want. We want it to have a little bit more control. And what's really neat about this is you can actually press these stars and it says, let the model define this parameter. And so if I click them, we get this defined automatically by the model. And this is saying that our AI agent can actually decide when to start the event and when to end the event, which is exactly what we want. We want to be able to give it a specific time and it puts it in. We don't have to manually specify it ourselves. Okay, so this is currently, we'll just put a block in our calendar, but we also probably want to give the event a title. Those are kind of like the three main things, in my opinion, that you need for a calendar. So under additional fields, for Google Calendar, the title is actually called the summary. So we go to add field and scroll down to summary. And let's let our AI agent also determine the title of the event. So I'll press these stars. And there you have it. So this is actually all you need in order to create an event in your calendar. That being said, we kind of have some weird things going on that I'm going to fix quickly. So first of all, you might notice that if we go back into our AI agent, our system message is still this cowboy philosopher. So let's not have that. We're just going to do with something very basic for now. We're just going to say, you are a Google Calendar agent. And I'm not going to specify anything else for now. And we'll kind of see how it works. So now if I hit save, and just for the sake of transparency, nothing up my sleeve, my calendar is currently empty for today. So if I go back here and I say, add an event called pottery tonight from 7 to 9 p.m. So this seems like a pretty basic thing that I'm asking it to do. It's actually a little bit trickier than you think. So let's see actually if it has done well. So if I go to Google Calendar, okay, so it actually managed to work for me. However, I encourage you to try this yourself and see exactly what happens. For some of you, maybe it's earlier in the day. Maybe it's yesterday. Maybe it's actually April 2024. I saw that for a lot of people. And the reason why is that our AI agent doesn't actually have a good sense of time. So when we say tonight, it doesn't know what the date is. And so we can actually give it a little bit more information in the system message to kind of center it on time. Studies have shown that this is a really good way to make sure it has a good sense of time. And so let's do that very quickly. And another thing that you might have seen is that maybe it just skipped creating an event at all. So there's a couple things we're going to add to this system message to make sure that it is performing properly. First of all, you can see we've got this thing fixed or expression. I try and just leave it on expression. And the reason why, you see it'll change, it'll look a little bit different, is that this lets us put in like little tidbits of code that lets us specify information. So in this case, I'm going to say current date/time. And then this is actually in the website document, but I'll do curly brace, $now, like what we were seeing before when we were making our create event tool. And you can actually see a preview here of what it's actually going to look like. And so it puts in the current date and time. I'm also going to say always use the Chicago time zone. So with that information now, it's really centered on a time. And so when I say tonight, it knows that tonight is January 8th, as opposed to April 8th or something like that. The other thing I want to do is say, when someone asks you to create an event, always use the create event tool. For some of you, it may have avoided using this tool, and so this is just a good way to make sure it knows that when we're saying it, don't hallucinate about making an event. It should just create the event itself. Okay, so now if I'm going to try it, let's see what happens. So I'm going to say tomorrow night, maybe. And I know it worked for me the first time. It may have worked for you the first time, but these are just kind of important notes. Since the model is only trained up to a certain point in time, it doesn't really know exactly what time it is right now. So let's see what happens now. So it's going to take a second and create an event. And yeah, we can see that it managed to add the event to my calendar tomorrow night. But this leads us to like some important questions. Like, what if I just said, make an event tonight called soccer? I'm not giving it a time. What does it mean for it to be tonight? Do I want it to be 5 p.m., 6 p.m.? What's like the default length of event that I want? So these are all things that we can add to the system message to make it perform exactly what we want. Maybe I could say the default event duration should be 1 hour. So let's actually just see what it does. I'm kind of curious. So it created an event, and if we go over to my calendar, okay, so it did 1 hour and it decided to do 7 p.m. Maybe that's because I specified 7 p.m. before. Maybe it's a little bit different for you. But maybe I really wanted it to be 8 p.m. Like these are all things that we are able to give it a little bit more information. Maybe for you, it actually even just asked what time you want it to be. That's also a possibility. It can kind of loop back to you. And because it's got memory, it can ask a question, remember what we were talking about, and then continue on. So this is great. We're going to move on to adding a couple more tools. We can create an event. We probably want to be able to delete an event as well. And right now, if I were to try and delete an event, well, it doesn't really have a way to do that. So let's say, actually delete that event. Let's see if it has the capability of realizing that it can't delete events. Let's see. It says I can do that. Okay, so now it's kind of hallucinating, but look, it's remembering that I was talking about the soccer event. And so let's see what happens when I say yes. Okay, actually, it figured this out. I don't currently have a delete event tool available. Then it tells me how to delete it manually. But so let's give it the ability to delete events. So I'm going to press this plus. Also an important note, you see I can break connections if I hover over and I use the trash can. It doesn't actually delete the node. You see now this is just away from here, so I'll just reattach. So I'm going to press plus on tool, and we're just going to add another Google Calendar tool. we'll leave all of this the same, but instead of operation being create, we're going to choose delete, choose the calendar, and we've got something called event ID. So the way that events are kind of referenced in your Google Calendar is some sort of like string of numbers and letters that we don't necessarily have access to right now. We'll let the model define this parameter, but currently it doesn't have a way of knowing what this event ID is. And so if we ask it, let's actually just see what happens. Now, can you delete the event? It has access to a tool now. Okay, let's see. It says delete an event. Let's see if it managed to do it. Okay, so it actually managed to. And so I think it's getting smarter. But essentially, when it created an event, it managed to reference the event ID. But let's say I had an event in my calendar from a long time ago that it didn't make, so it doesn't actually know what the event ID is. How are we going to deal with that? We're actually going to add a third tool. And this tool is called Get Events. So I'm going to press the plus again, go to Google Calendar. So yeah, so the only reason it was able to actually delete that event is because it made it, and in doing so was somehow able to reference what the event ID is. Normally it wouldn't be able to do that. But instead of the operation being create now, let's choose Get Many. And then we'll do the right calendar. And so what this is going to let us do is retrieve events from our calendar, and specifically retrieve multiple events because we're going to use this kind of like as a dual purpose thing. First of all, maybe you want to say, what's my calendar for today? And then it'll be able to retrieve all the events from your calendar. But then this also lets us retrieve the event ID. It gets all of the information about the event. You could have it return only a limited number of events. I'm going to do return all, and I'm not going to ask it to get like all of the events ever from my calendar. And when it does so, it filters. It doesn't just get all of the events from your calendar. It looks for events after a certain time and before a certain time. Right now, you see it's like saying now and now plus 1 week, but we're just going to let it choose how to filter. So if I say events tomorrow, it should probably filter from like midnight to midnight. And we're also going to give it the ability to filter beyond time. What if it wants to filter by attendees, by location, things by title of the event? There's a lot of possibilities, but we're going to hit add option. And to query lets it kind of have a little bit more freedom on how it wants to filter. And we'll press the stars. And so now it can kind of like build its own way to like look for events. Okay. So here's how we can actually test what I was saying before. Maybe you see that I'm a little surprised it managed to delete an event, but I'm just going to manually add an event to my calendar today called test from 2 to 3 p.m. So it didn't make it, so it doesn't actually have the event ID. But now, let's say, delete the event test today. And let's see what happens. So when it does it, okay, so look, it got events from the calendar, and then it deleted it. And it says deleted test. And so if we go over here, and we just saw it disappear. And so there we go. We could even ask it, what's on my calendar for tomorrow? And then we'll see what it does. We'll see it gets events from the calendar, and then says tomorrow, and it specifies the date as well. You have this event. So this is all very promising. We have managed to build something that's actually very powerful. We could make this even more powerful. We're going to do this in the exploratory content section by connecting it to like a different service. But even just within 1 hour, you have built something that's actually really useful and lets you control your calendar. Okay, so what I'm going to quickly do is put a couple questions up for you. And I want you to start to take a second, pause here, start to think about these, making an update event tool. Right now we can create events, delete events, get events. Maybe we want to update things in place, update the system prompt to include descriptions just so it knows how to use these these tools. We talked about a default amount of time, all of these things. So take a second to try these, pause the video, and then we'll come back and finish up the section. Welcome back. Let's finish this up, talk about a couple of things. One common thing I saw with the update event tool is that people managed to make the tool, but then it wasn't actually changing the things that you want it to. So let's go over and build it quickly just to make sure that we're all on the same page there. So heading over to N8N, it's the same process. We click here, press Google Calendar tool, choose the operation now as update. From list, we choose the calendar, and then we just need the event ID to update. So similarly to delete events, you just need the event ID in order to know which event we're specifying. And this looks great. However, we also have to tell it what it is capable of updating. So it's this thing called update fields. And so we can add fields. And you can choose exactly what you want it to be. I'm going to choose just a couple things. We probably want it to be able to change the timing of the event. So when it ends, probably when it starts as well. We could change the title of the event, so summary. And I mean, you could keep going with this, right? So you could add stuff like location, you could add attendees, whether it's all day or not. Feel free to try all of these options. There's a lot of different things here, but this is where we're going to start with. And without specifying these things, it's not going to update them. But it's important to note, maybe I would say I want to change the name of my pottery event to pottery with friends or something like that. Even if I specify all three of these can be changed, it will just choose to keep these the same. It's smart enough to do so. Okay, so now we've got these tools in our calendar. The other thing that I want to specify is this last question where I was asking about attendees. How would you add attendees to an event? So we could click on create an event, and in additional fields, we could just hit add field attendees. And then we could just use the model to specify it. I'm not going to do that for now. I'm just going to X that out. But one important thing to note, which is just kind of a nasty thing with the Google Calendar API, which is that if you ask it to have attendees and then don't put any attendees in, it breaks, which is kind of annoying. And there's two different ways around it. First of all, we could just put something in our system message that says, hey, always add this email. So you could put your own personal email as an attendee. So it's never going to be empty. Or what I've done in the past as well is I've just had two different create an event tools, one with attendees and one without. And that can also get around it. No worries if that's a little abstract. It's just kind of a little tricky thing with the Google Calendar API. But yeah, just so you have a sense of what is going on. Okay, so quickly to conclude this section, I just want to show you one thing. So just talk a little bit about the homework. So here are kind of the main things that we talked about today that I want you to have a good handle on. I think that these are very important just so you have a good sense of how to use N8N. No worries if this is all still feeling really new and really hard. We're here to help you. It's still the first week, right? There's still a lot going on. But let me quickly go over to the homework on Canvas, and I'll kind of show you what we're looking for. So on Canvas, you should see an assignment called Recitation 1 Homework. When I click on it, I'm just going to preview it, but you'll be able to see these questions. So we've got stuff like screenshot the system prompt. So literally all I would want you to do is go into the AI agent node, look at the system message, and just take a screenshot of it, and you'll upload it. It's okay if you can't show the entire system message. I just want to make sure you know what I'm talking about when we're doing that. Or this, it says add an event to your calendar and attach a screenshot of the whole workflow showing it ran. And we should see the check marks for each successfully executed node. So I go over here, I would send a message. We would see that the create an event in Google Calendar node has a little check mark, as well as check mark here, and when I see that, you just take a screenshot of literally this whole workflow. And doing so, I'd be like, okay, great, you were able to get the workflow to run. And this is just really a quick check to make sure that you are going through the recitation, it is working for you. And if you've got any questions, this is a good opportunity for you to reach out to me to make sure that we can get N8N up and running for you. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm going to move on to the exploratory content, but those were really the main things that you need to know. This all is just going to be sort of bonus, in case you're interested. We're going to get our calendar connected up with Telegram. Now I'm over in the website where I've got the instructions, and I'm looking at this part 2 connecting to Telegram. And I've got this another web page that kind of talks to you about how to get Telegram set up. So following that link, it'll take you to this software setup page. Scrolling to the bottom, you'll see Telegram. And here are the instructions we're going to follow. And essentially, this is the way we're going to work. This is going to work is Telegram is a messaging app. And the reason we're using it is it's really good at making chatbots. We are going to make a chatbot, and we're going to link it up to N8N so that when we send a message to the chatbot, it triggers our N8N workflow, which then connects to our calendar, and then we send a message back to Telegram. I know that sounds like a lot of steps, but once you have Telegram downloaded and you have made an account, I think you have to do it on your phone, but then I got it on my computer as well so that I can show you these steps. When you open Telegram, you're going to message this bot called BotFather, which allows you to make bots. So I'll type /new bot to create one. It says, all right, a new bot. What are we going to call it? I'm going to say Recitation 1 Winter AIML901 bot. Let's see if that works. Okay, it says use a username for your bot. So I'm going to say Winter 2026 R1 bot. But I think it has to be a unique name. So I'm just going to choose this and see what happens. It says, okay, done. Congratulations on your new bot. And you'll find it at this link and use this token to access the API. So there's two things we need to do. But so first of all, I'm actually just going to copy over this API token. I know I'm going rather quickly through this, so feel free to pause. This is mostly just to show you a really interesting setup. WhatsApp and Slack are a little harder to set up with N8N, and this is actually got many fewer steps. So I just wanted to show you this quickly. So I'll copy over this, and we're going to go back to Telegram. Okay, so we said use the token to access the HTTP API, and we are going to go back to here. Okay, so right now we've got a chat message, but we're going to actually delete this connection, and we're going to create a new trigger. So I'm going to press this plus, and I'll search for Telegram. Under Telegram, there's a lot of different options we can choose, but we're going to choose a trigger. We want to start our workflow with this, and we're going to say on message. And I'm just going to pull it over here for now. And inside this, we need to choose a credential. So I've already made a couple of these clearly, but I'll do create new credential. And the access token is just this HTTP API key that I got from Telegram. And I'll say winter 2026 Telegram test, just so I can keep track. And I'll hit save. And we've got that all set up. It says connection tested successfully. Great. And it says, okay, trigger on message, and something will happen. So let's quickly go back to Telegram. And it says you'll find the bot at this. So I'm going to click this link, and I'm going to start a chat here. I'll just say hello for now. We can see nothing is actually happening. But if we go back to here, I'm actually going to execute this node and see what happens. Okay, and if I click into it, I know there's a lot going here, but we can see that we received some message, and actually, if we look here, it says text hello, so that's the message that I sent. It's very important to note that bots in Telegram are not private, so this is very, very important that you are careful about this. One thing you can do is you can limit who can access this workflow, because right now, if anyone were to send a message to this bot, then it would access this trigger, and then if this were connected to the rest of my workflow, it would access the rest of the workflow. So imagine just some random person saying, what's my calendar to my bot? They can get my calendar, which is kind of a bad privacy concern. So we can actually get around that. So here is actually what my ID is, like my personal user ID. If I click add field, restrict to user IDs, Yeah, I'm just making sure that this is the same. Then I can just put in my user ID here. And this means that I'm the only one who will trigger this when I send a message. If any of you were to message my bot, it won't actually trigger the workflow. So that's just like important on like a privacy level, what to do. But let's see. Okay, so now we've got this Telegram trigger and we're going to connect it up. There's a couple of small changes we're going to make with the simple memory and the AI agent, because now, instead of a connected chat trigger node, we don't have that anymore. So we'll actually choose define below. And for the user message, we're just going to pull it from over here. So this is kind of a nice thing you can do in any N that we are going to practice, especially next week. But if I want to, I can actually just take like this text or this hello, I can pull it here, and it'll come up with like an expression. And we'll talk about what this expression exactly is, but we can see that it's previewing my message that I sent, hello. And so there we go. So that's a different way for us to specify the user message. So right now for the simple memory, we have this session ID, but we don't have a connected chat trigger anymore. So we need to choose define below. And for your key, you can choose something like I just want it to be about like my messages, so I can use my like user ID. If you want it to be safer, you could choose something a little different, but I think that should be okay for now. So now, with that in mind, now if we send a message to Telegram, here I'm going to save quickly, then we have a way of accessing memory, we've got a way of doing this, and the last step we want is we want to send a message back to Telegram. So we're actually going to press this plus. We don't want the AI agent to do it, but we want after the AI agent is done to send a message back. But first, let's just test this out. So the way to test this out is I'm just going to actually hit execute workflow. You see waiting for you to create an event in Telegram. So I'll go back to Telegram and say create an event tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. called test. When I send this, if we go over, we see it executed, and then now it's running. It created an event in the calendar, and let's take a look. So we can actually create an event tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. called test. If we go to my calendar, we can actually see it, and then it executed, and then it came up with some sort of like output. And we're going to take that output, and we're just going to send it back to Telegram quick. So I'll press this plus, I'll search for Telegram. And now we're just going to send a message. Where is it? Send a text message is what we want. And so we have the correct credential, message, send message. We need a chat ID, so who are we sending it back to and where? And then the text. So the text I'm actually just going to pull from the AI agent. But we can actually get the chat ID if we go back to the Telegram trigger. So we look for chat ID, and then I'll pull this in. And yeah, now let's try that out. So I'm actually, one way you can just do this is instead of executing the entire workflow, I could just execute this step. So if I do so, it sends something. If I actually go back to Telegram, we'll see it says created test tonight at 6 to 7 p.m. And it also, for some reason, put the event ID, and then this message was sent automatically with N8N. If we want to remove this last tag, we can click add field, append N8N attribution, and turn it off. And let me see one thing quickly. Okay, yeah, so we can see that it also like has this event ID. We could specify in our system message if we don't want it to send the event ID. That's a possibility as well. But yeah, so that's really how you do it. I could just delete this. Also, if we want to, we can deactivate it, which means it'll never be used. And the only last thing right now is that this only works every time I hit execute workflow, which is a little bit annoying. But if I hit publish, then it starts to listen. And so if I were to hit publish, give it a version name, I hit publish, and now your triggers will now fire production executions automatically. And so now if I were to send another message in Telegram, it'll automatically go through and send a message back and do everything we want. So that's all I really wanted to show you with Telegram. Feel free to reach out if you're having trouble getting it set up. But I think it's a really nice thing because now on your phone you can actually just send a message to get your calendar, add events to your calendar. I actually have a version of this set up with voice messaging, so that I can just send a voice message, it adds the event to my calendar or things like that. And I think that's a very useful thing that you can do. So with that in mind, this concludes the recitation. I hope that you have enjoyed building your first thing in N8N. Congratulations. It's exciting to see all of the things you can do even in just 1 hour. And we're going to keep building on this momentum. And there's so much you can learn in N8N. And so I'll see you in class.